Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself maybe in a new country, you're speaking the language, nailing the grammar, vocabulary spot on,
Hmm.
but you still feel like you're missing something, like your jokes fall flat, or maybe you accidentally sound rude,
Oh,
or you
yeah.
just can't quite read between the lines? It's that moment, when you realize mastering a language is, well, so much more than just conjugating verbs.
It's a classic experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that successful communication isn't just about what is said,
right.
but really how and why it's said in a specific context. So this deep dive is all about illuminating those often invisible layers of
The
language.
hidden stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Layers that are absolutely critical for truly being understood. Today, we're peeling back those layers by exploring two uh, crucial linguistic disciplines, pragmatics and sociolinguistics.
Okay.
We'll uncover what they are, why they're sort of the secret sauce to effective communication, and how you can actually develop and even assess these vital skills.
So it's not just about the words, it's about the unspoken rules, the cultural nuances,
Hmm.
and how language truly operates out in the wild. Because, like, as many of us have experienced, being grammatically perfect doesn't always mean you're communicating effectively. Not at all.
But precisely. And that's the core challenge, isn't it? For anyone learning a new language,
Yeah.
even perfectly grammatical sentences can be perceived as, well, strange or worse.
Yeah. Awkward.
Right, or lead to outright misunderstandings and communication breakdown if you ignore the social rules in the specific context you're in. It's kind of like having all the right ingredients, but no recipe for the meal.
That's a great analogy. Okay, let's start by digging into pragmatics then. You said this is the linguistic discipline that focuses on what is not explicitly said, but still clearly understood.
Exactly. It's all about how we interpret utterances based on context, manner, style, all those things around the words.
Right, like that classic scenario. You're in a room, there's an open window, it's getting a bit chilly. You turn to someone and just casually say, it's very cold today, isn't it?
And if they immediately get up and close the window, bam, they've just demonstrated perfect pragmatic understanding.
Even though you never actually said close the window.
Nope, you didn't give a direct command, but the implied meaning, driven by that shared context, was crystal clear. The literal words were far less important than the unstated intention. That's the magic, really, of pragmatics, uncovering the hidden meaning.
So that ability to infer and adapt, that's pragmatic competence. I seem to recall Noam Chomsky initially. He kind of set it apart from grammatical competence.
He did, yes. Chomsky spoke of knowledge of conditions and manner of appropriate use. But what's truly profound, and what linguists like Canali and Swain and Bachman later emphasized, is that pragmatic competence isn't just some add-on.
It's essential.
It's absolutely essential for genuine communication. As Kent Bach explains it, the listener is always actively trying to figure out the speaker's real intention, and they rely heavily on extra-linguistic information. That's information outside the words themselves. Context, world knowledge, all of it.
Can you give us an example where that extra linguistic information really changes how we interpret something simple?
Absolutely. Consider this sentence. Anne told Betty that she wanted to borrow her car.
Okay, whose car? Anne's, Betty's.
Exactly. Without more context, it's ambiguous. But now listen to this. Anne told Betty that she could not borrow her car.
Okay, now she must be Betty because Anne is denying Betty.
Precisely. There's no grammar rule that tells you this. Your brain is using common sense. Who would be denied borrowing a car in that setup? That common sense inference is pragmatic competence at work, drawing on outside information.
That clicks. It's like our brains are constantly doing this linguistic detective work. So, okay, within this idea of pragmatics, what are some of the finer points, maybe the tools we use for this detective work?
A really fundamental concept is speech acts. This is the powerful idea that when we use language, we're not just, conveying information.
We're doing stuff.
We're doing things.
Yeah.
We're performing actions with our words.
Like when you promise someone something, you're actually performing the act of promising.
Exactly. John Austin, a philosopher, famously proposed 3 types of acts that happen simultaneously when we utter something. There's the locutionary act.
The literal words.
Yep, the actual utterance, the words, their basic sense and reference. Then there's the illocutionary act. That's the intended force or action of that utterance.
Like, is it a statement, a promise, a command?
Exactly. And finally, the perlocutionary act, which is the actual effect that utterance has on the audience, the result.
Okay, so if I were to shout, come here.
Right. The locutionary act is the imperative sentence, come here. The illocutionary act is clearly a command.
And the perlocutionary act.
Would be you actually moving towards me, hopefully. But what's crucial for these to work are what Austin called felicity conditions.
Felicity conditions.
Yeah, these are the shared social conventions that must be met for a speech act to actually achieve its purpose. Like, if you don't recognize my authority to command you, the command might fail to have its perlocutionary effect. It won't work.
Got it. And John Searle, another linguist, he categorized these actions further.
Yes. He identified 5 basic kinds of speech acts that cover a huge range of human interaction. We have representatives, where the speaker commits to the truth of something, like the sky is blue.
Okay.
Directives, which are attempts to get the listener to do something, please close the door.
A request or command.
Right. Commissives, where the speaker commits to a future action, like I promise to be there.
Making a commitment.
Expressives, which convey a psychological state, like I apologize for being late or congratulations. And finally, declaratives. These are the really interesting ones. They actually bring about an immediate change in the state of affairs just by being uttered under the right circumstances.
Like, I now pronounce you married.
Exactly. Or you're fired. Or I declare war. The words themselves change reality, given the right authority and context.
Wow. And it's rarely as straightforward as just a direct command, is it? We often use indirect speech acts. That seems much more common.
Oh, absolutely. Way more common. When someone says, it is very cold in here, don't you think? They might be indirectly requesting you to close the window.
The first example again.
Exactly. The beauty is that listeners typically understand these. They draw on their knowledge of speech acts, those cooperative principles we'll get to, and just general inference skills, even when the speaker isn't being explicit at all.
This idea of hidden meanings and context really brings us to desis. That sounds like a very academic word, but what's its core idea in simple terms?
Desis, yeah, it sounds complex, but it simply refers to linguistic elements whose meaning shifts depending on the context of the utterance. Think of them as shifters.
Shifters? Like what?
Pronouns like she or me, demonstratives like this or that, and time or place adverbs like here or today. Their meaning depends entirely on who is speaking, where they are, and when they are speaking.
So I'll stay here means something totally different if I say it right now versus if you say it, or if we were in a different city yesterday.
Exactly. These elements, these shifters, are only clearly understood when the speaker and hearer share the same contextual reference point. So we talk about different types.
Types of DXEs.
Yeah. Person DXEs pronouns like she, me, you. Place DXEs this, here for things close by, that, there for things further away, that proximal distal distinction.
Okay.
Social DXEs, which is fascinating. It reflects social relationships, like using tú versus usted in Spanish, or formal versus informal you in other languages.
Ah, right. Like showing respect or distance.
Precisely.
Okay.
And finally, discourse deixes, which refers to parts of the text or conversation itself, using words like the aforementioned, or as I said below, or that point you just made. It anchors the language within the ongoing talk.
What's truly profound, I think, about language and just social interaction is how much of it revolves around politeness and face. This is all about navigating social waters. And often it means prioritizing avoiding offense over maybe crystal clear, blunt clarity.
It's an invisible dance we do constantly, every single day. Politeness is essentially a linguistic device to reduce friction in interaction. Imagine you need a pencil. Someone nearby has one.
Right.
Your first impulse might be just to grab it, right? But social norms, well, they prevent that. Instead, you might say something like, could I possibly borrow a pencil for just a moment?
Or even more indirectly, oh, shoot, I forgot my pencil today. I'm such a mess.
Exactly. You're using these linguistic strategies to achieve your goal while showing respect and maintaining social harmony. You're managing the interaction carefully.
So what determines how polite we need to be? Is it just like intuition?
Not entirely. Linguists Brown and Levinson identified some key determinants. Things like the social distance between speakers, are you close friends or strangers? The power relationship, is it your boss or your buddy?
Okay.
And the cultural ranking of the imposition itself. Asking for a pencil is small. Asking for a huge loan is big.
Right, that makes sense. It explains why you don't speak to a close friend in the same way you'd speak to your university professor or even your doctor. The language shifts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this leads us directly to sociologist Irving Goffman's concept of face.
Face. Okay, what does that mean here?
Face is sort of like a person's public self-image, their self-esteem in a social context. It's the positive social value a person claims for themselves.
Right.
And what's surprising is how much of our everyday speech isn't just about what we want, but about protecting this invisible social armor, our face, and crucially, the face of the person we're talking to.
So we use, what do you call it, redressive language.
Exactly. Extra words, polite phrasing, softening language, especially when making demands or requests, particularly on people we don't know well. Asking a close friend, and show me your notes, is probably fine.
Yeah, direct.
But to a professor, you'd almost certainly phrase it differently. Mr. Jones, could you possibly show me your notes? That extra elaboration, that could you possibly, that's a redress. It's a linguistic cushion to mitigate the imposition and protect their face, their autonomy.
And this face has two sides, doesn't it? I remember reading about that.
It does. Positive face and negative face. Positive face is our desire to be liked, appreciated, approved of, to have our values shared.
Okay, the desire to be well thought of.
Right. And negative face is our desire not to be imposed upon. It's the desire for autonomy, freedom of action, freedom from imposition.
So back to the pencil example.
Right. When you say, could I possibly borrow a pencil?
Yeah.
You're appealing to their positive face, hoping they see you as considerate and respecting their negative face by minimizing the imposition with polite phrasing. You're acknowledging their right not to be bothered.
It's a constant balancing act. Okay, now for a truly fascinating aspect of pragmatics, conversational implicature. This is how speakers can mean more than they literally utter. And it's a huge part of how we communicate efficiently, right? We don't spell everything out.
Exactly. This is a key notion from the philosopher Paul Grice, and it's tied to what he called the cooperative principle. Basically, the underlying assumption in conversation is, make your contribution such as it is required. You assume the other person is trying to be cooperative.
And he proposed 4 maxims or guidelines for this cooperation.
That's right, 4 maxims that typically govern cooperative conversation. Quantity be informative, but not too informative. Don't be overly wordy or rambling.
Just the right amount.
Yep. Quality be truthful. Don't say things you believe to be false or for which you lack adequate evidence.
Be genuine.
Be relevant. Stick to the topic at hand.
Stay on point.
And manner be clear. Avoid obscurity. Avoid ambiguity. Be brief and be orderly.
But people don't always follow those rules. We break them all the time, don't we? For effect.
We do. Absolutely. Speakers often flout or violate these maxims quite deliberately. However, the listener still assumes the speaker's fundamentally trying to cooperate.
Oh, okay.
So when a maxim is flouted, the listener tries to figure out why. They search for meaning at a deeper level. And that inferred meaning is the conversational implicature. It's a shared unspoken understanding that arises from the apparent violation.
Okay, give me an example. Say someone says, Anne's new dress is very nice, isn't it? And I reply, yes, and I am Angelina Jolie.
Right. You've clearly blatantly flouted the maxim of quality. You are obviously not Angelina Jolie.
Obviously.
But the listener instantly understands you're being sarcastic. You're implying very strongly that you think Anne's dress is not nice at all. You mean the opposite of your literal words, and the implicature carries the real message.
Got it. And this is different from conventional implicature.
Yes, subtly different. Conventional implicature is less about context and flouting rules, and more about specific words that inherently carry an extra layer of meaning, like the word but in she is blonde but very intelligent.
Ah, the but implies a contrast, or maybe challenges a stereotype.
Exactly. The but conventionally implies some kind of contrast or unexpectedness between being blonde and being intelligent.
Yeah.
And unlike conversational implicatures, which you can often cancel, I didn't mean to imply anything negative, conventional ones usually aren't cancelable. You can't really say, she is blonde, but very intelligent, and I don't mean there's any contrast. It just doesn't work.
Ew. Okay, that's a lot of layers just in pragmatics.
Yeah.
So if pragmatics reveals these hidden dances between individuals in a specific moment, let's zoom out and see how society itself shapes our words. That's the domain of sociolinguistics, right?
That's a great way to put it. Sociolinguistics really zooms out. It fundamentally challenges the idea of sort of universal language rules that apply everywhere equally.
Okay.
Instead, it focuses intensely on how linguistic variations, differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, are deeply tied to social and environmental conditions, how language shifts and bends depending on who is speaking, to whom, and in what social setting.
Which means sociolinguistic competence is basically knowing how to speak appropriately given your circumstances.
Exactly. Simply put, it's knowing how to use language appropriately in different social situations. Native speakers, well, they tend to acquire this naturally, mostly unconsciously, growing up in a particular community.
But for foreign language learners,
It's a huge hurdle. They often need to be explicitly taught how to produce and understand language in different sociolinguistic contexts. They need to learn to consider factors like the participant status, the purpose of the interaction, specific cultural conventions,
Like how to express emotion appropriately, or when to use formal versus informal language, or even how to navigate slang.
all of that. And this means teaching culture becomes absolutely essential. You can't separate them. As Nina Wolfson pointed out, each community truly has its own unique communication conventions rooted in its culture. This sociolinguistic relativity means you simply can't achieve true communicative mastery without understanding the cultural framework that governs how language is used in that society.
So this naturally leads us to the heart of sociolinguistics, variation. It's about how all those situational factors, age, education, where you're from, socioeconomic status, affect language use.
Precisely. And this variation is often quite subtle. Speakers adjust their speech based on these factors, sometimes consciously, sometimes not. But there are always boundaries, social norms about what's acceptable or expected.
And these variations are harder to grasp than grammar rules.
Often, yes. They can be much more understated than other social conventions, making them incredibly difficult for foreign language learners to pick up intuitively. So the goal of sociolinguistics is to meticulously describe these variations within a language and link them systematically to specific social groups and situations.
And when we talk about a speech community in this context, it's more than just, say, people who speak English in London.
Oh, much more. While general linguistics might define a community geographically, sociolinguistics really broadens that. It considers all those societal and extralinguistic factors. A speech community is ultimately defined by shared language patterns, shared rules for using language, and shared attitudes towards language use, not just physical location.
Okay. And there are different types of communities based on language use.
Yes. Braj Khatru, for instance, identified 4 common types. You have multilingual communities like Switzerland, where several official languages coexist, and often a contact language is adopted for wider communication.
Right.
Bilingual communities, such as Canada or Belgium, with 2 official languages deeply integrated into society. Monolingual communities, like maybe France, with 1 dominant official language, but still potentially wide internal variation in dialects, accents, and styles. And diglossic communities. This is where 2 distinct languages or varieties are used by the same speakers, but for different purposes or in different domains. A classic example is maybe Spanish-speaking immigrant families in the USA who might use Spanish at home or for informal talk, but English for work, school, or more formal situations.
So the key takeaway is, a speech community is really about those shared patterns, rules, and attitudes regarding language.
Exactly, which naturally brings us to concepts like style and register. How do these differ? They sound similar. They are related, but distinct. Style usually refers to an individual's range of linguistic possibilities. It's the way one person adapts their word choice, their pronunciation, their sentence structure to fit the situation, and the discourse, like shifting between formal and informal, or written versus spoken language.
And native speakers do this pretty easily.
Instinctively, usually, but it's notoriously difficult for foreign language learners to master that range appropriately.
Okay, so that's individual style. What about register?
A register is more about the language features associated with a particular group or activity. It's a set of language features, often specific vocabulary or syntactic patterns, linked to a specific interest group. Think of doctors' medical jargon, lawyers' legal language.
Or even how recipes are written.
Exactly. That's a great example of register. It's a collective, specialized way of speaking or writing tied to a purpose, distinct from an individual's personal stylistic choices across different situations.
So it's more than just jargon then, more than just special words.
Yes, definitely. While jargon, specialized vocabulary, is often a key part of a register, it can be broader. Some linguists talk about it as a sociolect, encompassing both word choice and typical sentence structures. Think of academic writing or legal documents. They have characteristic vocabulary and grammatical patterns.
Right.
Linguist Douglas Biber did extensive research showing that registers are distinguished by the relative frequency and distribution of many linguistic features together: phonological, grammatical, lexical, the whole package.
You can really see this if you compare, say, the language in an insurance policy document
Oh, yeah.
versus a newspaper article reporting on a fire versus a cooking recipe for cookies. The language is just world apart.
Absolutely. Insurance language is often incredibly complex, using elaborated syntax, maybe passive voice, lots of nominalizations. sometimes seeming to violate Grice's maxim of manner in its pursuit of legal precision.
Definitely obscure sometimes.
Right. Newspaper articles have their own conventions, maybe more direct narrative style, specific vocabulary for events. And recipes. They rely heavily on imperative verbs. Combine, mix, bake, serve. Short, direct commands. Each genre clearly showcases a different register shaped by its function and audience.
And finally, a big area of sociolinguistic research, and sometimes a controversial one, is gender and language, sometimes called genderlex. What does this area typically focus on?
It primarily studies systematic differences in language use based on gender identity.
Hmm.
Robin Lakoff's work back in 1975 was really foundational here. She observed, for instance, certain features she associated more with women's talk in her context.
Oh, what sort of features?
Things like using a wider range of precise color terms or more evaluative adjectives, lovely, divine.
Yeah.
Maybe a more hesitant or questioning intonation, even on declarative statements, more use of tag questions like, isn't it? Or,
Yeah.
Also, a general tendency toward politeness strategies, maybe less direct commands, less swearing, more indirectness, and using more polite noises like uh-huh or mm-hmm to show active listening and encourage the speaker.
Okay. And what about tendencies observed for men's speech?
Generally, research has often suggested men, on average, tend to be perhaps more direct, more likely to interrupt or dominate turn-taking in mixed-gender conversations, and perhaps viewing language more as a tool for exchanging information, reporting facts, or problem-solving, rather than primarily for building rapport or maintaining social connections.
And this field also looks at how language itself reflects society.
Absolutely. How language structure can reflect and sometimes perpetuate societal organization or biases. For example, the historical tendency in many Indo-European languages for masculine forms to be the unmarked or default common gender, mankind, chairman, using he generically. This can inadvertently reinforce stereotypes about professions or roles. It's a complex area looking at both usage patterns and linguistic structure.
This all brings us to a really crucial point. How do we actually teach all this in a foreign language classroom? Because as we said, traditional lessons focusing just on grammar and vocab often fall short when it comes to developing this pragmatic, sociolinguistic ability, right?
That's a critical challenge, absolutely. The classroom environment is often, well, artificial compared to the real world. It's functionally and formally limited. Language is often treated more like an object of study. Learn these rules, memorize this list, rather than a living means of communication.
So students might ace the grammar test.
Exactly. But be completely lost, pragmatically speaking, when they try to use it outside. They might sound rude or awkward or just ineffective, even with perfect sentences.
So how do we bridge that gap? What can teachers or even learners themselves do?
The teacher's role becomes absolutely crucial here. They really need to design communicative activities that simulate real-world interaction. They need to use authentic, engaging materials, not just stuff written for learners.
Real language.
Real language.
Yeah.
And actively integrate grammar instruction with how it's used in context. And perhaps most importantly, explicitly raise learners' awareness of pragmatics and sociolinguistics, making these invisible rules visible.
So pragmatic competence itself isn't maybe teachable, like a verb conjugation?
Right. As Gabriel Casper argued, you can't just drill pragmatic rules. But you can absolutely create learning opportunities that foster its development, provide the right input, create the right tasks, guide awareness.
Which means teachers often have to create their own materials, because many textbooks just don't cover this stuff well.
That's often the reality, unfortunately. And Andrew Cohen makes another vital point. Pragmatic ability isn't some isolated skill. It impacts all four traditional linguistic skills.
Listening, reading, speaking, writing. How so?
Well, as listeners, you need to interpret not just what's said, but what's implied, including tone, intention, sarcasm, politeness cues, even nonverbal signals if you can see them.
Okay.
As readers, you need to grasp rhetorical structure, understand authorial stance, recognize irony or subtle humor. As speakers, you need to know how to choose the right level of formality, directness, politeness for your audience, and purpose.
And writing.
As writers, you need to craft messages that are not just grammatically correct, but also contextually appropriate, clear, and achieve the intended effect on the reader. It's woven into everything.
So what are some really practical strategies then for teachers trying to foster this, or even for learners working on their own?
Well, teachers can provide direct input, explicitly explaining certain pragmatic norms or speech acts. Or they can act more as facilitators, setting up tasks where learners discover these things themselves by analyzing real language.
And authentic materials are key.
Absolutely essential. Get away from the simplified textbook dialogues. Use real-world snippets. Short recorded conversations, scenes from films or sitcoms, these are great for showing interaction. News broadcasts, interviews, maybe even song lyrics or advertisements. Anything that shows language being used naturally in context.
And what about specific tasks or exercises?
Noriko Ishihara suggests categorizing tasks. Some might have a primarily linguistic focus, like analyzing how specific vocabulary, grammar structures, discourse markers, or even tone of voice are used to convey pragmatic meaning in a clip.
Okay.
Others have a more sociocultural focus, analyzing speaker intention, levels of directness or politeness, the relationship between speakers' underlying cultural norms or values reflected in the interaction. But these two focuses are really complementary. They reinforce each other.
That makes sense. Can you give some examples of effective exercises?
Sure. Learners could collect their own data, watch a scene from a film or sitcom, and identify moments of sarcasm or maybe a communication breakdown, and analyze why it happened pragmatically.
Become language detectives again.
Exactly. Comparing how specific things are done in your native language, L1 versus the target language, L2, is incredibly powerful. How do people apologize? Give compliments? Make requests? Complain? Seeing the differences highlights the L2 norms.
That comparison is really revealing.
Definitely. Analyzing examples of both successful interactions, felicitous uses, and awkward or unsuccessful ones, infelicitous uses, helps learners pinpoint the crucial contextual elements. Reconstructing dialogues based on a situation, or even better, engaging in role plays.
Role plays seem key for practice.
They're excellent, especially for working on specific intentions like persuading someone, politely refusing a request, making a complaint effectively. And of course, the ideal, if possible, is actual experience in a foreign language context. Even temporary immersion provides invaluable opportunities to notice these pragmatic rules in action.
So it's about really targeted teaching and awareness raising for something like speech acts.
Yeah, ensuring students know the range of possibilities. For making a request, it's not just the simple imperative, gave me. It's the polite question, could you? The hint, I'm thirsty. The formal construction, would you mind? Showing that spectrum.
And for days.
Understanding the core meaning of the shifters, but also being acutely aware of potential L1 interference. That Spanish su example, meaning hisherit's there, that causes real problems for English learners if they're not aware.
Right, and politeness.
Teaching both positive politeness strategies, showing solidarity, interest, and negative politeness strategies, minimizing imposition, respecting autonomy, and explicitly discussing how social distance and power relations influence those choices.
So knowing when it's okay to say, pass me the pencil, versus when you absolutely need something like, would you be so kind as to pass me the pencil?
Precisely. And for those Gratian maxims we talked about,
Yeah.
encouraging learners to be informative, but not ramble, to be clear, relevant.
Yeah.
And crucially, warning them against direct word-for-word translation from their L1, which might unintentionally violate a maxim, especially relevance or manner in the target language culture.
Okay, now for the million-dollar question. How on earth do you assess something so nuanced and context-dependent? How do you measure pragmatic competence reliably?
It is challenging. There's no easy multiple-choice test for this. Pragmatic ability is so heavily tied to specific contextual factors that are really hard to control perfectly in a traditional testing situation.
But it's important to try.
Absolutely. Assessing it, even imperfectly, signals its importance to students, shows them this matters, and it can help identify specific areas where they need more practice or awareness. Role plays are probably the most widely used and arguably most effective tool for assessment.
Okay, can you walk us through an example, like that scenario you mentioned earlier?
Right, let's take that one. You completely forgot a crucial meeting at your new job with your boss. An hour later, you finally show up to apologize. This is the second time you've forgotten a meeting. Your boss is clearly annoyed and asks, what happened to you this time?
Oof, tough situation.
Exactly. How the student handles that, their language, their tone, their explanation, their apology, directly tests their pragmatic competence in a high-stakes, context-rich scenario.
So what specifically would a teacher be looking for? What are the assessment criteria in that kind of role play?
They'd be assessing several specific elements. Did the student choose and use the correct speech act appropriately? Primarily an apology, but likely also an explanation, maybe a promise it won't happen again. What specific expressions did they use? Were they suitable for apologizing to a boss? Did they provide an adequate amount of information? Not too much detail, not too vague. Crucially, was the level of formality appropriate for the relationship?
The boss-employee dynamic.
Yes, and the level of directness versus indirectness, and of course the overall level of politeness used to mitigate the offense and repair the relationship.
That's a lot to juggle.
It is. And using rubrics or checklists can be incredibly helpful for teachers here to quickly and systematically assess these different dimensions and identify strengths and weaknesses.
What might be on such a rubric?
Well, Ishihara suggests including things like choice and use of appropriate vocabulary and phrases for the speech act, grammatical structures used to convey politeness or tentativeness, the specific speech act strategies employed like giving a reason for the apology, expressing remorse, offering repair, the overall pragmatic tone. Does it sound sincere, respectful? The organization of their discourse, does it flow logically? Use of discourse markers or fillers? Well, now, actually, you know. And even things like epistemic stance markers, how they express certainty or uncertainty. I think, maybe, I guess, I'm afraid.
And you mentioned earlier it goes beyond just the words themselves.
Absolutely. Good assessment should also consider relevant sociocultural elements, for example, how you refer to people in authority or specific cultural norms around apologies. And ideally, even extra-linguistic items, if it's a live or video role play, things like appropriate eye contact, gestures, overall demeanor in that cultural context.
Wow. It sounds time-consuming, but really valuable.
It is time-consuming, definitely, compared to grading a grammar quiz. But developing and assessing pragmatic competence is incredibly rewarding because ultimately it empowers you, the learner, to express yourself not just correctly, but truly precisely, appropriately, and effectively in all sorts of real-world contexts. It's about real communication.
So, what does this all mean for us? Where does this leave us? It really feels like language isn't just a set of rules in a book. It's this living, breathing, social organism.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It's not just about getting the words right technically, but about understanding the context, figuring out the intention, and ultimately making that connection with another human being.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights that true fluency, real communicative mastery, isn't just about how big your vocabulary is or whether your grammar is perfect.
There's more to it.
So much more. It involves deeply understanding and skillfully navigating all those unspoken rules, the pragmatic principles, the sociolinguistic norms that govern how we actually interact with each other through language. And this, I think, raises an important question for you, the listener.
Think about a recent conversation you had. Maybe it was in a different cultural setting or just with someone new, someone you didn't know well. Can you pinpoint an instance where an implied meaning was absolutely crucial? Or where a subtle social rule, maybe about politeness or formality, or the register you chose, really influenced how you interpreted something, or how you chose to say something yourself? What new insights do these concepts we've discussed today, pragmatics, sociolinguistics, face, speech acts, offer for your own communication, both in your native language and perhaps any others you might be learning or using?